Hey, by way of introduction, I need to let you know that the video I filmed a little while ago about my Neil Simon letter, I took for granted you'd know who Neil Simon was. That was a mistake. Neil Simon was a very popular playwright in the 60s and 70s. He wrote dozens of New York plays, even has a theater named after him, the Neil Simon Theater in New York City. He wrote Plaza Suite, he wrote Chapter 2, he wrote The Odd Couple, he wrote dozens of plays. He was a television writer for a while, then he became a playwright. A lot of scholars didn't study Neil Simon's work at like universities and stuff because he was considered, what they sometimes called a dinner theater writer. He wrote comedies, a lot of comedies. He wrote a couple serious plays too, but his comedies were the most popular. Anyway, and they were very popular on Broadway. You can look them up. Anyway, the video I'm about to show you, which is coming up right there. No, wait, right there. I don't know. Anyway, it's about to go to. I talk about a letter that I received from the famous playwright one time, Neil Simon. And I wanted you to know a little bit about who he was before you listen to my story. All right. Take a look. Here it comes. Okay. Regarding this letter that I got from Neil Simon. Isn't that cool? Here's how the story goes. I was an undergraduate student at New Mexico State University, and I was taking a directing class from a rather famous professor who had basically created the theater program at New Mexico State University. His name was Herschel Zahn, who was Russian. He worked in the Moscow Art Theater. He worked in the Jewish Theater in New York City. And Herschel, anyway, was a great professor. I was taking a directing class from him, and the classes were always small because we had to do directing projects, and that took a lot of time. And then we had an end-of-the-year showcase. So he told us on the first day, try to find that like one-act play, that small piece that you'll do for your final project and get your grade in this class. He said, be careful now. If you do a play that has royalties connected to it, the school may be obligated to pay those royalties, and we don't want to do that. So pick plays that are in the public domain, that there are no royalties associated with them. Plays like Shakespeare or classical plays from the Greeks and the Romans. Those kinds of plays didn't require that you pay royalties to see the play, to produce the play. Anyway, we started working on our final project, and each day, the professor at each class that we had would go around the room and he'd say, Tony, what are you doing? And Tony would say, well, I'm doing the second act of the Greek play such and such. And so, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing such and such. He'd say, good. And he came to me and I said, Mr. Zone, I'm going to do the second act of Plaza Suite by Neil Simon. Zone said, no. You can't do that because it has royalties associated with it. We're not going to pay royalties for you to do the second act. And I said to him, though, Mr. Zone, I looked in the play itself, and in the front pages where it talked about the royalties on the play and stuff, it does say that you can do the play royalty-free if you have the permission of the author. So I wrote the author a letter and asked if I could do his second act for a school project. Everybody in the class laughed. Mr. Zone laughed. Anyway, he would go around the room the next week. What are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, I'm still working on the second act of Plaza Suite. Oh, and it got late in the semester. And he said, you better change. You better change because, well, the problem is you're going to get right up to the final project and you're not going to have anything else to be presented for your final grade. And so I started to think about some other play. I had cast the second act that I was going to do. I had begun rehearsals, but I was looking at abandoning it now because it was getting late. And then, to my dorm room at the university, came this letter. Postmarked Grand Central Station. It says, Dear Mr. Pickard, thank you so much for your letter and your kind comments, and I regret I have been unable to answer you sooner. As for doing an act of Plaza Suite without royalties, if it is intended solely as a school project and not a commercial venture, there is certainly no problem. You have my permission and my very best wishes for your success. Sincerely, Neil Simon. Now, the letter means a great deal to me, but what happened years later is just as catchy. Years later, I was hired as the head of that same department where I did my undergraduate students. I was there for a decade as head of the Department of Theater Arts. When I first went there and I interviewed for the job, I was taken to a play in the theater, and Herschel Zahn, the old professor, accompanied me there. And walking through the lobby, he says, in his Russian accent, I can't do it very well, but he says, "They tell me you used to go to school here." Because this is like 20 years later. And I said, "Yes, sir, I used to go to school here. I worked on several plays with you." "Oh, yeah, which ones?" I said, "Well, I did The Lower Depths with you, and I did Shakespeare's Tempest." And I said, "So I worked on several plays." "Oh, I don't remember you. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you here." It's all great. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my office at the university, in the department head's office, where he used to have an office. And I look up, and across the room, a head is poking in my door like this. And it's Herschel Zahn. And I said, "Mr. Zahn, please, come in, sit down. I'd love to have a talk with you." He goes, I remember you. He said, "You're the Neil Simon guy." And he smiled. And we were good friends. And sadly, he's passed away many years ago. But that's the story of the Neil Simon letter. I hope you have a good day. Take care. Bye.